Hey, welcome back. So, Mr. Glenn Livingston is a Ph.D. and a veteran psychologist and the longtime CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm which has serviced several Fortune 500 clients in the food industry. You may have seen his or his company's previous work, theories, and research in major periodicals like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Indiana Star-Ledger, the New York Daily News, American Demographics, or any of the other major media outlets you see on the page, on his bio page. If you want that, I'll show it to you if you want it. You may have also heard him on ABC, WGN, or CBS Radio, or UPN TV. Disillusioned by what traditional psychology had to offer overweight and or food-obsessed individuals, Dr. Livingston spent several decades researching the nature of binging and overeating via work with his own patients and a self-funded research program with more than 40,000 participants. It's a lot. Most important, however, was his own personal journey out of obesity and food prison to I lost the page out of obesity and food prison to a normal healthy weight and a much more lighthearted relationship with food. You ready to rock the show?
I'm ready to rock the show, Chris.
Awesome. Well, you are now live on Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self. Glenn, thank you so much for coming on today. You are a powerhouse, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it. How can I help?
Yes, we're going to dive into that. And before we get to what you're working on today, the journey, and diving even more into the food obesity challenge and all these epidemics that are going on today, it's ridiculous. Let's dive into the question of the day, which is, Glenn, how has the concept of rising from the ashes, how has that showed up for you? How has that principle, that mindset showed up for you and your life, as well as working with the clients and people around you?
Well, a couple of times, actually. Mm-hmm. Most recently in 2015 and early 2016, I discovered that, at least some details out, but I was going to have to get divorced after 28 years and close down all my businesses and do something else. And, you know, it was fairly devastating, but simultaneously, out of chaos comes opportunity. And, you know, like Sartre said, every day we have an opportunity to remake ourselves. And this was the quintessential opportunity to remake myself. And I just kind of dug deep and I said, what have I done that's been most meaningful? How do I want to spend the rest of my life? How do I want to give back? And of course, what's going to provide the income and retirement potential and, you know, help send my kids, my sister's kids. I don't have kids. My sister's kids to college. I hope I don't have kids. So
fingers crossed. Yeah. Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Yeah. When I was a kid, I wasn't so careful. You never know. But when that was not the first time that I had to remake myself. In 2001, my wife at the time and I had a focus group facility. We built one of the most technologically advanced focus group facilities of the time on Long Island, right before 9/11. And we were spending $150,000 a month, and we had 21 people working for us. And we had this business plan and trajectory. It was all going really well. And then your friend of mine, Osama bin Laden, flew some planes into the World Trade Centers, and nobody wanted to come to New York anymore. And my wife and I at the time had a big argument about, I thought we should close it on September 12th. I said, no one's coming. She said, no, we have to stick in there. We stuck in there for 2 years. We lost about $2 million, which we didn't have. So we had to borrow all kinds of money to make that happen. I wound up $700,000 in debt. I gained a lot of weight. Back then I was binging. And I always say I could have just been broke. I didn't have to be fat, sick, and broke. But live and learn. And I did manage to remake myself over the next 7 or 8 years. And learned all sorts of things about marketing and all sorts of things about, rebuilding it. And it was only money. It was only money. You know, still have my skills, still have my health. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. You took us, you already took us there, man. Rising from the ashes.
No, I mean, it's funny. I think anybody who lives a self-reflective life, and I tend to agree that a non-reflective life is not worth living. So I think anyone who lives a self-reflective life, every 10 years or so, you find yourself a different person. You look at the friends that you made 10 years ago. You look at the things that you read. You look at the career projects that you had, and they're different. There's like a different set of people and things that I gravitate towards now.
Totally.
So I wonder who I'm going to be, in 2028. I really wonder. I like the person I am now, though. I do.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. I love it. What a great way to start off.
Because I'm good enough and I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Yes. I love it. Standing in that power, man. Cool. So let's dive more into what you're working on today. Tell us about Never Binge Again.
Well, so I'm not just a psychologist who works with eating disorders. I was very disordered myself. I had what you would call exercise bulimia. I'm 6'4", I'm fairly muscular. And when I was a kid, if I worked out 3 hours a day, 2.5, 3 hours a day, I could eat anything I wanted to. 2 pizzas, 6 black and white cookies, a box of munchkins, whatever you can imagine, I could go to town. And I thought it was like a superpower. It didn't seem like a problem. It really didn't. It was just like, that was my life. I would work out, I would eat. I would work out, I would eat. But then fast forward a few years, and I'm in graduate school, and I'm married, and I'm seeing patients, and I'm commuting 4 hours a day to get to the school that I want to get to. And I just didn't have the time. But I did have the inclination to keep eating like that. And I found that I couldn't stop. And so I got fatter and fatter and fatter. And I got kind of obsessed with food, because when you suddenly realize you have to stop, but you can't stop, you start thinking all the time, well, how much is going to be okay, and how am I going to make up for it? And it just becomes the central component of your mental life. Which was very bad, because I'm from a family psychologist, and being a psychologist was always really, really important to me. I always say my dad was on the radio when I was a kid, and I heard him on the radio when I was 4 years old. I said, "Mom, why is Daddy on the radio?" And she said, "Because he's a psychologist." And I said, "Well, what's that?" She said, "Well, he makes people happy when they're sad." And I said, "I want to do that. Why is he on the radio?" She said, "So he can make more people happy when they're sad." I said, "I want to do that."
Wow.
So I just always really wanted to be a psychologist and make people happy when they were sad. It's not that simple. And so being obsessed with food while I was sitting there working with a suicidal adolescent, or talking to a couple after they'd been in an affair in the marriage and everything was at stake, it was very torturous for me, because those are things that are high risk. Those are high risk situations, and you have to be very, very present. You should be present with all your patients, but in particular, those are very, very high risk things where you need to be there and kind of lend your emotional instrument to these people. And I couldn't. I never lost anybody. I think out of 250 couples, only one got divorced, but two of them got divorced. But I was not 100% there, and it always bothered me. So I went the traditional route. Being from a family of 17 psychotherapists and psychologists, I knew a lot of the best ones in the area, in the New York area. So I went to see psychologists, tried to figure out, well, what's eating me? It's not what I mean, it must be what's eating me, right? And I learned an awful lot about myself. I went to Overeaters Anonymous and learned more about myself. I did this study. I don't have kids, and I never commuted, so I had a lot of kind of a dual career. Part of it was a clinical psychologist. The other part was using the research skills that I learned in graduate school to run predictive models for large companies and build these studies. So I knew how to do these studies. And so I created a study for myself. I said, well, they pay me an awful lot of money to run these studies. I'm going to run one for myself. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with people who can't stop eating chocolate, like me, who get stuck on potato chips, or get stuck on pretzels and pasta and pizza. Long story short, over many, many years, when clicks were cheap on the internet, I got 40,000 people to take a survey. And I did all types of analyses on the survey. And I found 3 interesting things, which at the time I thought were going to be the cure for binge eating, and I was going to win the Nobel Prize or something, but not even close. I found that people who struggled with chocolate tended to be lonely or brokenhearted. That made sense. Most of my binges, started with chocolate, and I was in a not so great marriage. So I was kind of lonely and brokenhearted. People who struggled with salty, crunchy things tend to be stressed at work. The people who struggled with pasta and bagels and soft chewy things tended to be stressed at home. So that was interesting. I went to my mom, who was a psychotherapist also, and I said, Mom, is there any reason why I would have a pattern of feeling lonely and running to chocolate? And she got this horrible look on her face of shame. And she said, I hate to tell you, but when you were a little boy, your dad was a captain in the Army. And they were talking about taking him to Vietnam, and I was terrified. And my father, your grandfather, was in prison, and I was devastated. I just idolized this guy. I couldn't believe he went to prison. And I was really depressed, and I just sat and stared a lot. And I got this bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup. I'm dating myself with the brand name, but you can tell by the gray beard anyway. I got this bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup, and I put it in a refrigerator on the floor. And whenever you came to me crying or, wanting me to feed you, if I didn't have it in me to do it, I'd say, go suck on your bottle, Glenn. And you would go and you would go get the bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup from the floor, and you would suck on it and go into a chocolate coma. And that's, I don't know how much time you have, so stop me if I need to, but.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. This is gold.
So that's what I thought also. I thought, hey, this is the match that struck the fire. Yeah. And if I were in a movie, at this point, my mom and I would hug and we'd have a good cry, and then I would never have chocolate again, right? But that's not what happened. We did hug and we did have a good cry. I forgave myself. I was no longer as mad at myself about the trouble I had. I was no longer angry with Mom. It was a good thing to talk about. But I didn't stop eating chocolate. As a matter of fact, it got worse. And the reason it got worse was because it was like there was this little voice in my head that said, hey, you know what, Glenn? You're right. Your mama didn't love you enough. And she left a great big chocolate hole inside of you. And until we can find the love of our life, you're just going to have to go right on binging on chocolate. Yippee, let's go get some right now. And so at the same time, I was kind of reading some alternative addiction treatment literature. And this guy was talking about there being this voice of addiction as opposed to your human voice. And they said you can't love that voice better because that voice really comes from your lizard brain, from the most primitive part of ourself. And when the lizard brain, which evolved hundreds of millions of years ago, when it sees something in the environment, it says, do I eat it, do I mate with it, or do I kill it? It's like eat, mate, or kill. There's no love there. There's no aspirations or long-term goals. There's no contributing to society. It's just eat, mate, or kill, and that's it. And so when your paradigm, if you're standing in line at Starbucks and there's a big hairy chocolate bar at the counter and the chocolate bar is saying to you, chocolate comes from a cocoa bean and cocoa bean grows on a plant and therefore chocolate's a vegetable, let's go after it. If your paradigm is, I must need to love myself more, what happens is your higher brain, which is where love and long-term thinking and goals and aspirations and weight loss and everything you're planning, that's where that lives. That just goes out the window and the lizard brain takes over. So this guy said, look, you can't love yourself then. You have to kind of capture and cage this like a rabid animal. You have to dominate this thing. I'm really paraphrasing. It's Jack Trimpey at Rational Recovery. I'm really paraphrasing what he said, but he said, you got to really capture and cage this thing. That really flipped my paradigm. And so I realized that food, emotional triggers may cause us to want to binge, but there is a voice that makes it okay. There's an intervening voice that has to rationalize why you're doing this despite your best laid plans. Now, sometimes that voice is as simple as, screw it, I'm going to do it, right? Sometimes people don't even hear the voice, but if you take people back through their binge, their mistakes, they will find at some point that there had to have been a justification. There had to be because you'd set up these other plans beforehand that were important to you. So there had to be something that made it okay. And so I realized that we need very practical ways to control that voice. It's possible to intervene at the level of that voice rather than being a detective and a psychologist and figuring out why you overeat like you're in the movie. So you can figure out the why later. So a simple way of saying that is you don't necessarily want to be a detective or a psychologist. You want to be a fireman. You want to put out the fire first and then figure out where the match came from afterwards. Yeah. And so I decided, this is the embarrassing part for me. After all these years, this was 30 years in the making for me. I lived a lifetime of overeating and binging. And I was about 50 pounds heavier. My triglycerides were through the roof, and the doctors were yelling at me and saying I was going to die and blah, blah, blah. And I have all the tests to prove it. But after all these years and, the big study that I did and millions of dollars of consulting and all this experience and thousands of patients that I worked with, here's what worked for me. I said, you know what? I'm going to draw a line in the sand. Trimpy works with black and white addiction, it's mostly drugs and alcohol. But food is more complex because you have to take the line out of the cage and walk around the block a couple of times a day. And I said, well, I'm just going to try drawing one line in the sand. So let's say I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. Monday to Friday, I just don't eat chocolate. And then if I hear that voice in my head that says chocolate's a vegetable or has any other reason why I should have chocolate on a Wednesday, that's pig squeal. That's going to be my inner pig. And my inner pig is squealing for chocolate, which is pig slop. And I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And I know that sounds ridiculous. It's very crude. I'm a vegan, by the way. I'm an animal advocate.
Wow.
So
Wow,
it was a poor choice of metaphors. It's just a mental construct. Real pigs, we need to be nice to them in the world. But this mental construct, this pig inside of me, this pig needs to be put in a cage and stopped from wreaking havoc on my life. And so the way I did that was I would draw a clear line. Anything that was over the line was pig slop. Any little voice that said, I want to eat the pig slop, that's pig squeal. I don't listen to pig squeal. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. It's very primitive. It's not sophisticated at all. But what it did was at the moment of impulse, it gave me those extra microseconds that I needed to wake up and make a better decision. Remember who I was and what I wanted to be around that food and make a better decision. And ever so slowly at first and then faster later on, it was like there was this algorithm in my head. And it's like the constructive and destructive thoughts about food got pulled apart. And all of a sudden I could hear what this crazy thing it was in my head that was convincing me to do all kinds of crap with food, and I could stop doing it. Did a lot of experimenting with different types of rules. I kept a journal for a lot of years. That journal eventually became the book, which became the bestseller. And that's what I did.
Dude, that's awesome. So much gold in there. And I love this, the pig squeal, like creating a different way to look at what's happening in our mind, a different relationship and a different way to show up in terms of our addictions or challenges or the things that are sabotaging ourselves. Is there any other examples that you've used or created with your clients that would be beneficial to share with our audience?
Well, I mean, in the book, I talk about the 4 different types of rule categories you might want to consider. Okay. So at first, when people discover this, they say, well, I will never do this again. I'll never do that again. And we can talk about why people are frightened of the word never in our culture and why you don't have to be that frightened of it. But so never is like the easiest category to understand. I will never eat chocolate again. I'll never eat chocolate on a weekday again. Then there are conditional rules you can make, like I'll only ever eat pretzels in a Major League Baseball game again. And those turn out to be really useful because there are a lot of exceptions to our daily routines. Like what happens on Thanksgiving? What about when you go out with your colleagues? What about when you're at a social event? What about on your birthday? And if you kind of step back and make a list of exceptions and exactly how you want to be around that food and those exceptions, that can be helpful. There are things you will always do with food. Like I'll always have 2 glasses of water when I first wake up in the morning. There can be always rules that just support mindfulness. So I will always take 3 deep breaths before dinner. I will always put my fork down between bites, right? I will always eat sitting down at a table. There are always rules you can make. There are unrestricted rules that you can make just to remind yourself of those things you can have without even thinking about it. I can have as much whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruit and vegetables as I want to, as long as I don't have it with nuts or whatever it is, whatever it is for you. But you want to kind of think through what's unrestricted in your diet because it's easy to create rules that are too restrictive, and then that actually causes a binge. If you create a set of rules that interferes with your body obtaining the calories and nutrients that it really needs, maybe 400 or 500 calories less so you lose weight slowly. then your body's going to want to force you to be less discriminating. It only makes sense that we do that. There's some rules you can't make. You can't say, I will never pee again, because you're going to find out I found out the hard way about that on Route 93 in August of 2016 on the way to a doctor's appointment. I got stuck in traffic for a very long time, and I found out you can't make a rule that says I will never pee again, and we're going to leave it at that for now. But you get the point. That you're. I tend to like people to start with just one rule. Don't try to make the whole plan. Start with one rule. What's your single worst trigger food or behavior? And try to make something that I know that your inner pig, or you can call it your inner food monster. Some women like to call it their inner bitch. It's just not something cute. It's not a pet that you want to nurture. It's not your inner wounded child. It's not you. It's a bodily organ whose urges you need to control in the same way that you control the urges of your testicles, your ovaries. Right. Like you don't run up to pretty women and kiss them in the street. At least I don't, Christy. Do you run up to? Some people do, I guess. But you know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Yeah. So one rule, because you really want to reclaim your sense of power and hope and enthusiasm. Because in our culture, food is out of control. I consulted for Big Food for a long time. I feel guilty about it. There are billions of dollars that go into engineering, hyper palatable concentrations of starch and salt and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins. The advertising industry tells you can't live without it. Billions of dollars go into that. People think advertising doesn't affect them, but the truth is it affects you more if you think it doesn't affect you. The addiction treatment industry says you're powerless over all this. The best you can hope to do is not quit, but abstain one day at a time. It's a perfect storm for people to feel at the mercy of their bodily impulses. And you don't have to feel at the mercy of your bodily impulses any more than you have to feel at the mercy of your testicles. You really don't. Really don't. You can make decisions about who you want to be and how you want to behave. So you got me on a soapbox, and I'll shut up for a minute in case you have questions.
Oh, it's great, man. Yeah. So I heard, really that the rules, going back a little bit, it's the categories of different rules that we can have is I'll never do X, or I'll never do X when I am at a baseball game or whatever, certain places, or I'll always do X. I'll always take those three deep breaths. I'll always do these things. And then we can create unrestrictive rules as well. And then we dove into like with people's mindset about choice. Like I know when we have choices of like the more choices we have, the more overwhelmed we are, and the less choices that we have, the less overwhelmed, and we're easily able to make that. And you said to start with one rule at a time. So is there any guidelines you have about too many different options or choices, or anything that's come up around that in terms of food? Do you recommend people limit their number of choices and options in their house so that they aren't overwhelmed with that and they have to use decision-making power? I'm curious how that's showed up for you.
Well, willpower is a fatigable muscle. All the research suggests that it's not really like an on-off switch that some people have and some people don't. It's more like gas in the tank that burns out over the course of the day. What burns it out is making decisions over the course of the day. Incidentally, not just decisions about food. Your willpower with food is also burned out by doing math problems, by making decisions about what to do with your email. Do I delegate this? Do I defer it? Do I reply to it? Do I report it to spam? So you can kind of try to batch those tasks, and you'll have a little more willpower when you come to the end of the day. Self-care refuels it during the day also, by the way. But you're onto something when you say that recovery has something to do with limiting the number of food decisions you have to make during the day. What I'm actually doing when I say I will never have chocolate on a weekday again is I'm eliminating my chocolate decisions during the week. See, in our culture, people say you should use guidelines rather than rules. They'd say, well, just avoid chocolate 90% of the time. But if you avoid chocolate 90% of the time, and it's a Wednesday and you're in front of the chocolate bar at Starbucks, you've got to make a decision. Is this part of the 90% or this part of the 10%? So I don't like guidelines. I mean, there's some guidelines that are good guidelines. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, that kind of thing. It's not that I don't like them, But that doesn't convey the special power of Never Binge Again. Never Binge Again is about making rules that really make a lot of your food decisions for you in the first place. What you're really doing, so this is a very subtle point, but it's a very powerful point. What you're really doing when you say, I never eat chocolate on a weekday, is you're making a character statement. You're really saying, I'm the kind of person who doesn't eat chocolate during the week, or I'm becoming the kind of person who doesn't eat chocolate during the week. Character trumps willpower all the time. If you walk into a diner and the waitress says, I'll be right back, I just got to get your menu, and she sits you down at the table. And on that table is a crisp, shiny $20 bill that the last customer left for her. And there's no window, and there's no video camera, and there's nobody up front, and nobody would see you take it. The waitress didn't even see it there yet. Virtually everybody says they would never take it. It's not even a consideration. And I would say, why? It would be pleasurable. Nobody would know. It wouldn't have any serious impact. Why don't you do that? They say, well, I'm not a thief. And I'll say, well, so you're saying as a matter of character, you've pre-made all your decisions about what you're going to do when there's money on the table that's not yours ad infinitum, and it requires no willpower whatsoever for you to do that. And they say yes. And they say, why can't you do that with food? See, it's the same thing. So what you're really doing is you're making a statement of character, and you're eliminating those choices. On a more practical level, the approach that I find works, yes, if you have an infinite number of potential choices of foods to eat, then you're going to be making decisions all day. You're going to wear down your willpower. It might be good to plan out your food for a week so you don't have to make those choices over the course of the week just to get yourself under control. But on a practical level, I find that what works is just focusing on what's your go-to thing or behavior that usually starts the binge. People usually have 1, 2, maybe 3 behaviors that'll start the binge. Sometimes it's eating in the car. So sometimes it's, fatty foods from the deli. Sometimes it's pizza. Sometimes for me, it was always chocolate. I would have pizza later, but I would start the binges with chocolate. So the first thing to do would be to get chocolate under control. And then you want to consider, is this something that I want out of my life altogether? Because for some people, never is a lot easier than sometimes. I'm one of those people. I purposely used the conditional rule that I will only stop having it during the week because I didn't want to scare people away at first. For me personally, I just didn't eat chocolate. I've tried 6 ways to Sunday to figure out conditional rules, and it just doesn't work. So I just don't have chocolate. Other people can. Other people really can have chocolate on the weekends, and it works out perfectly fine for them. It's a lovely thing. What you want to do to see if you're one of those people is, let's keep going with the chocolate analogy.
Sure.
Imagine your future 1 year from now in 2 different scenarios. One scenario is that you don't have any chocolate at all, not one bite. The other scenario is that you only have it on the weekends. And what do you see for your future in both scenarios? How healthy are you? Have you lost weight? What are your relationships like? What clothes are you wearing? What are your day-to-day activities like? Your whole world can change if you make one serious change to your eating behavior. And anybody that really struggles with overeating knows that it's a nightmare and it steals a good part of your life. So you ask someone who's really struggling with chocolate what their life is going to be like in a year if they didn't have a bite, and they'll say, oh my God, I'll be 30 pounds thinner and my mind will be clear and I won't have zits anymore and I'll be more regular and I'll have all this energy and, I'll be hugging my kids and walking my dogs and going for hikes and having all this great fun that life was meant to be. So and then you compare and contrast those 2 scenarios, and you'll get a good sense of whether you unconsciously believe that you need to give it up, at least for a little while, or whether you want to just kind of control it conditionally.
So it's when there's such a drastic change through the moderation versus complete abstinence, that's when you can tell that it's like something that probably abstinence would be better to at least try for some period of time.
Yeah, do a 60-day experiment without the monkey on your back and see what it feels like.
Yeah,
and then make up your mind later.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Okay, so with that, we were able to create like more ease in our life when we've already made these decisions, when we get the monkey off our back, when we say never or always to do these certain things, when we're planning out our choices, our meals. How else can we really accelerate our unconventional ways to lose weight or to release weight and be healthier?
I don't like when people lose weight too fast.
Yeah.
I believe that there's an evolutionary mechanism in the brain which says if calories are unavailable for a period of time and nutrition is unavailable for a period of time, that as soon as it is available, we need to store them as much as we possibly can. And why else would it be that for so many people, getting too full is a trigger to binge more? I really believe that that's what's going on. And so I've seen with all the people that I work with that the solution for binge eating is not, it's not, well, let me fast for a week and, make up for what I did. But it's like, let me have breakfast the very next morning, even if I don't feel like it, and eat a regular healthy diet, maybe with a few hundred calories under what I need for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to make up for the binge. That's what I've seen the solution is. And then just very regular feeding, very regular. So I don't really want to, I know everybody, that's not a sexy sales point to say lose weight slowly. But ultimately it's the fastest way that you can lose weight. Yeah.
Sustainably.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what other like brain chemistries or tricks or hacks do we need to know about to be able to get through our, binge eating more effectively?
So let's say you want to give up chocolate or only have it on the weekend or whatever. Your inner pig is going to say, your inner food monster is going to say, you can't do that. You're going to feel way too deprived. It's the only sweet thing. You need that to live, right? So what you need to understand is a phenomenon called downregulation and upregulation. And what happens when you eat these things that are products of industry, which didn't exist on the savannah, which we didn't evolve to deal with that level of pleasure. You really have to understand that there is no corollary in nature to a chocolate bar. It's just not there. It's a concentrated form of sugar and fat and other stimulants that's just not there in nature. When you repeatedly expose your taste buds to that and you expose your neurological pleasure system to that, what happens is everything down-regulates. And so your taste buds will no longer respond to an apple the way it's supposed to respond to an apple. If you don't have sugar or chocolate for a month, and you have an apple, oh my God, that apple is so much better. And there's actually research that your taste buds will double in sensitivity over the course of that month. But your pig will say you're going to be tortured forever. It's just not true. You have to get through those first few weeks. It will feel as if you need the chocolate to survive. The chocolate is engineered to hijack your survival drive. In animal studies, by the way, when they wire up the electrode to the animal's dopaminergic pleasure center, and then they put the other end of the wire on a lever, and they do this with rats, for example. They've also done it with higher mammals and even humans, I believe. But when they do that, that rat will press that lever thousands of times a day to the exclusion of everything else. It will ignore its survival needs. It could be a starving rat, and it will ignore the food in the cage. It could be a nursing mother rat, and it'll abandon its pup to go push that lever thousands of times a day. It'll crawl over painful electrical grids to push that lever. It's not a far stretch to say that the billions of dollars that are going to engineering these food-like substances, these are pleasure buttons. It's not that far putting an electrode in your brain and making you look for love at the bottom of bags and boxes and containers. It's just, it's not that far. But if you take the right pill, Keanu, like was it Keanu Reeves in The Matrix? I forget it was the red pill or blue pill.
Yep, red pill.
If you kind of wake up and you stand aside and you see what's going on, and instead of feeling ashamed or diseased or powerless over everything, you say, these are a bunch of people in big guys in white suits with mustaches that are making money off of my misery. I'm fed up with this. I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to step back. I'm going to stop winging it and playing it by ear and letting them convince me that I need this crap to survive. And I mean, some people want some of that stuff in their diet. That's okay if you can handle it. A lot of people can't handle it. Feelings aren't facts. It might feel like I need this to survive, but I don't. I know my body will upregulate. It's not going to feel normal. I'm not going to get high with food for a while. When you're eating chocolate, by the way, it's not really for comfort. You're eating to get high with food. It is most definitely an artificial substance that doesn't exist in the world. I don't begrudge that pleasure to people who can handle it, but right. I'm not one of them. And you can step aside if you recognize that this downregulation is going on, and you remember that your body will upregulate when you stop overstimulating it with the hypersized substances that don't really belong in our bodies.
So, do you think that it's best for a parent just from birth to not allow their children, if the parent is modeling the, what we're talking about here and having an effective diet, cutting all the processed foods and that kind of thing out, do you think it's the parent's prerogative and in their best interest to never allow their kids to have, sugar or these other processed foods?
Well, it's certainly in the kid's best interest not to have that introduced to them in the first place, in the same way that it's better for, the kids not to have cocaine or heroin. Right. There are studies now that show that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. There are studies about that. So it's certainly in the kid's best interest. What's not clear to me yet, and I haven't seen the research about it, maybe someone knows the research, is how do you acculturate a kid in this society to be around all the other kids and manage to not have that kind of stuff. And inevitably, it seems like sooner or later they do. So what I've seen with the parents that I work with is that the best you can do is be a really good model, explain to the kids why you do it to the best of their ability. If they have something, ask the kids how they felt after, how do they feel, after that. Unfortunately, children have not worn out their pancreas yet, so they can handle a lot more sugar and stuff that we adults really can't. But, you do the best you can. You lead by example, do the best you can. And I think that sinks into the kids. Kids do 80% of what you do and 20% of what you say anyway. So be the change you want to see in the world, like Gandhi says. And yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. When people are in this process of binge eating, what other signs should they know about? What other ways can they break the cycle, break the pattern, and get free?
Well, it's difficult. But if you're in the middle of a binge, you've probably lost your ability at the moment to think straight about what you're having. Like, there's this part of you that's watching and saying, oh my God, I shouldn't be doing this. And you can always use the present moment to be healthy. You can always wake up at any point and do that. But really, you're in a battle with a lower part of yourself in much the same way that an alpha wolf is in a battle with a challenger for leadership of the pack. Now, you are superior to that challenger. The lizard brain evolved way before the part of us that we think of as us did. And the neocortex and even the mammalian brain, the emotional brain, has the ability to inhibit those lizard brain impulses. We are superior. And so you can assert that dominance in the same way that the alpha wolf takes an attitude towards the challenger. The attitude the alpha wolf takes towards the challenger is the intent to kill. Because look, get back in the line or I'll kill you, right? Now, you can't kill your lizard brain. You need it to survive. But you can growl at it. When I first discovered this, I actually put both of my middle fingers up towards it and I said, screw you, I'm in charge. Get back in your cage. And that worked. Wow. It's not a good thing to do in a store when other people can see something. You can say it in your head.
Isn't it even better to do then, because you're like truly just like, I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care. The king. The king knows what's right.
Yeah, you just don't wear your Never Binge Again T-shirt when you're doing that. Yeah. Okay.
Come on, we're starting a revolution here, doctor.
Yeah,
I love it.
So those are the neurological things that I think people should know. They should understand that all of the research suggests that when you eat these bags and boxes and containers of artificial pleasure substances, that the result is self-neglect. That's what all the research says. And it takes a little bit of work. Henry Ford said thinking is the hardest work that there is. That's why hardly anybody does it. It takes a bunch of work to think through what the rules of the road should be for you. And you've probably read a bunch of diet books. You've probably consulted with doctors and nutritionists. Most people know what healthy eating is and what healthy eating isn't for them, at least to a certain extent, to do better than they're doing. So time to take responsibility. I'm not going to tell you how to eat. Don't look for some other diet guru to tell you how to eat so that your inner pig can eventually say, oh, there's something wrong with that guy's diet. We'll have to try another. But in the meantime, let's just binge. Take responsibility. Pick a rule, follow it, watch yourself follow it. And know that like within 72 hours, you're going to feel a lot better about the whole thing.
Wow. So we should be able to start seeing those benefits immediately when we are taking action on it, when we're taking action that's consistent with this new person who we say we are, this new way of being, new showing up in the world, a new character, right? We get to create a new character, a paradigm, a new identity for ourselves, and that the benefits of that should start showing up fairly quickly.
Yeah. I am becoming a person who doesn't eat sugar. If you don't have sugar for 72 hours, you're going to feel much better. Well, by the way, going back to your earlier point about eliminating choices, if you should decide not to have sugar, you need to define very carefully what sugar is. And I prefer that people define it inclusively rather than exclusively. So some people will say, well, I'll just never have processed sugar again. But there's so many different forms of sugar and like so many different chemical combinations. It's better to say the only sweet taste that I'll ever eat again are whole fruit, berries, stevia, and blank, whatever it is for you, right? So for me, the only sugar I have is whole fruit and berries. If something tastes sweet in my diet and it's not whole fruit or berries, then it doesn't belong there. For other people, it's whole fruit, berries, artificial sweeteners, and any food which has a sweetener as the fifth ingredient on the label or lower. It's up to you. It's up to you. But define it inclusively rather than exclusively, otherwise the pig will sneak it in.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge for you being a vegan and health professional and empowering people all around you to make these choices, better choices for themselves, and integrating into our mainstream society? How have you found that balance, and what have you found works? What have you found doesn't work?
I'm actually writing another book about that with another leader in the vegan world, Doug Graham. And the essential paradigm shift is to move from feeling like a deprived weirdo to feeling like a leader. So if I'm out to dinner with family and friends, I love these people, and they're making fun of me for getting a salad, right? And they're having filet mignon or whatever they're having. And I know that the diabetes rate is up by 80%, and I know that the cardiovascular incident rate is, I think, almost triple, and obesity rate is through the roof. And I know that the average person is going to be tormented in their later years from diet reversible diseases. Diet reversible diseases. I mean, you look at the research; these things don't have to happen. You don't have to die of a heart attack. You don't have to. I mean, even cancer. Even a lot of forms of cancer are diet preventable, if not diet reversible. And so, I tell myself somebody has to go first. And it's one thing to show up at the table with a bunch of research and scientific studies and argue with people that this is how they should be eating, which makes you really popular, by the way. Not. And it's another thing to lead by example. So when people, I used to have rosacea and psoriasis and eczema, and I was, 50 pounds heavier, and I looked really, really sick, and I look so much better now. And I just sit down and eat things, and I mostly listen to people if they complain. If someone's really curious about why, I'll talk to them. But there are a lot more social pressures than you realize, which convey the need for people to eat the same way in a group.
Yeah.
Think about two tribes breaking bread to declare peace together. It's a welcoming and a declaration of peace and non-hostility. Think about the fact that there was a time when we didn't have a lot of diversity of food. And, if one tribe secured a food source, if everybody didn't eat it, then those other people would die or get sick, and the tribe would have to take care of them. It was a burden to the whole tribe. So underneath people think that the pressure has to do with convenience and people feeling guilty for eating what they're eating only and wanting to eat what they want to eat. That's part of it. But there's also this, hey, we need to function as a tribe. Step out of line and we'll kill you, right? And people don't realize that that's going on in a food environment. Then people get together at a restaurant where the whole business model is designed to seduce your inner pig, and you're facing a tremendous amount of pressure. Try to make your decisions beforehand. Look at the menu before you go. Figure out what you're going to have. Nothing that says you can't eat before you go. I'm a big guy. I need like 3,500 calories a day. I am not going to survive really well on a salad alone if that's all I'm having that evening. So I'll usually have a banana smoothie before I go. Or maybe I'll have some nuts, or maybe I'll carry some nuts with me and throw them in my salad or something like that. So there are those kinds of challenges. Those are the dietary philosophy. I read an awful lot about nutrition. I found something that really works for me. I wish the whole world ate like that. I am an animal advocate, but I don't do that in my professional capacity because there are people who eat low carb or paleo, and even though I don't believe that's the healthiest way to eat, it is so much better than binging. It is just like light years beyond binging on starch and sugar and all the things they're pouring through their body. And so I just shut my mouth, and I feel blessed that they're able to do that. And who knows, maybe it's better. Maybe I don't really know, despite what I believe. So, yeah. but I do feel challenged with that being a vegan sometimes. Yeah.
Dude, that's a great share, great perspectives, great science behind it with the tribe, and man, that's really, really, your stuff, man. So we're beginning to come towards the end of this. Is there any last minute guidance you wanted our audience to know about never binging again, about being the greatest possible self with our health, with our vitality, and just showing up nutritious, filled, fueled, and fulfilled?
Well, I would like to have a chance to send them something free at the end, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yes.
But the kind of quintessential piece of advice I want them to have is that this doesn't have to be so complicated. We live in a culture which says that your overeating problem is a complex phenomenon, that it has so much to do with your history and genetic makeup, and it doesn't have to be so complicated. You can cut through all that. You can make a line in the sand. You can watch yourself trying to break it. You can make a commitment to separating your constructive versus destructive thinking about food. And all you really need to do to not binge is not binge. It sounds crazy. There are a lot of psychologists out there that are going to slap me when I say that, but it's true. To not binge, you have to not binge. It's like, I think Trimpey talked about alcoholics feeling like they were drowning and they're flailing about and they're so helpless. But it's like drowning in 6 inches of water, just like with 6 inches of mud. Stand up, clean yourself off, and you won't drown, right? Yeah. You could drown if you stay down there. You could drown if you insist on keeping those attitudes and keep flailing about. You could drown. But if you stand up, you're going to be dirty and uncomfortable for a while. You got to wash yourself off, but then you can walk away. It's not life-threatening if you don't let it be.
That's powerful. And just the truth, man. Stop being a victim.
Yeah.
People need to stop being victims.
Yeah. No, really. It's a message of power in a culture of powerlessness. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Awesome. So, yes, Glenn, tell our audience, share with our audience how they can stay connected with you and what we want to invite them to do next.
Well, this is a weird theory in theory. And I'm kind of a weird guy, and Chris and I have a weird talk about what this whole thing is. Got a pig inside of me, and it's like my testicles. What the hell are these guys talking about, right? In practice, it's actually very compassionate and simple. So I recorded a whole bunch of coaching sessions that you can listen to at neverbingeagain.com. You click on the big red free free bonus button and sign up for the list. I will also get you a free copy of the book in electronic format, Kindle, Nook, or PDF. And I created a bunch of food rule starter templates. So no matter what your dietary philosophy is, whether it's low carb or high carb or vegan or point counting or calorie counting or macrobiotic, whatever it happens to be, there is a template to get you started so you can see what kind of rules might come together. And that's all at neverbingeagain.com. Click on the big red button and sign up for the free bonus list.
Awesome. Amazing. Cool. So what else do you have planned this year, Doctor? I know you mentioned that you're coming up with a new book. What else can we be anticipating from you? Well,
there's another book. This is probably the first time I've mentioned it. There's another book called Never Bitch Again.
Yes.
And it's about using the same structure of mind to support positive thinking and eradicate negative self-talk. Turns out, by the way, that there's a relationship between negative self-talk and binging. Mm-hmm. Negative self-talk is your pig's effort to make you feel too weak to resist the next binge. Mm. And so anybody that's struggling with negative self-talk probably will find that there's some addiction, some immediate gratification that they're trying to get out of their life. And what you don't recognize is there's a connection between the negative self-talk and that addiction. The negative self-talk makes you feel too weak to resist the addiction. So there's actually a secondary gain. There's pleasure that's fueling that negative self-talk. And in order to eliminate that, we have to structure our minds in a similar way and recognize that pleasure. And recognize that there's more pleasure in thinking positive than letting the negative self-talk take over.
Yes. Dude, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear about that. We'll have you back on again, man, because that's an amazing conversation. And Dr. Glenn Livingston, you are a powerhouse, man. Thank you so much for all the research that you're doing, the commitment to empowering people in their health, in making better choices, in living a full life, man, a full, long, vital, healthy, vibrant life. And thank you for the work that you've done on yourself to discover this and then share it with people. We appreciate you, man.
You got it. I appreciate you helping me spread the word.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, dude, remember the podcast episode should be out in about 4 weeks. So everyone listening to this replay, make sure you go listen to Never Binge Again. Go visit Never Binge Again. Go click on the big red button. And Dr. Glenn Livingston, hope you have the best day ever.
Thank you, man. It was fun.
All right. Take care.
Okay.